And you mentioned a few minutes ago something known as covariant entropy bounds. And are those Bousso bounds? Is that what they're...
So the Bousso bound, yeah, the name I gave it is covariant entropy bound because I guess you don't name it after yourself to start with. But a lot of people refer to it by my name, and it's basically a generalization of this statement that I made earlier, where I said, look, if you have these elephants sitting inside some imaginary sphere in the universe, and now I convert these elephants into a black hole with the same size, well, they couldn't have had more entropy than the area of that sphere that surrounded them, even if I don't convert them to a black hole. There's some relation between information content of a region and the surface area surrounding them. Well, that turns out to be false. It's false when you, for example, look at really large regions in our own expanding universe. It's false when you look at regions that are already deep inside a black hole. It's maybe in hindsight not surprising that it can be false because the argument clearly only works if the thing that you're starting from isn't already a black hole or in some other way it's very strongly gravitating. What I was able to do is write down a conjectured relation, a proposal for how areas, arbitrary areas in any situation, are related to the quantum information of adjacent regions or regions that are enclosed in these areas. That relation appears to be completely robust, and it holds even inside black holes and in our expanding universe. But it's, for the same reason, it's a little bit further. It's not something that would have followed just by thinking about, for example, Bekenstein's work and the generalized second law of thermodynamics and wanting those kind of things to work. That's how, of course, we were led to that next step, but it's much stronger than what would have been needed for the consistency of black hole thermodynamics. And it provides significant additional evidence that there is, an incredibly rich pattern in the connection between quantum information and space-time that we need to understand, that we need to get at the roots of.
Is there an intuitive way, maybe, of describing how the bound would be reached or discovered for some volume like this room?
Well, for a volume like this room, the bound really would just say, well, the entropy in this room cannot be larger than the surface area of the walls in certain units. Okay? In this room, we didn't need my bound all that much because this room is not very strongly gravitating. We're not about to form a black hole. We're not feeling the expansion of the universe on this distance scale and so on. But when you, for example, look at some star that's collapsing and it's burned out its fuel, it's collapsing, it's forming a black hole. Eventually, the star is entirely inside the event horizon that it has formed around it. But the surface area of the star keeps shrinking as the star is collapsing. Yet the amount of information that's in the star can't have changed. And so sooner or later, it'll be true that the surface area of the star will be smaller than the amount of information contained in the star. At that point, the holographic principle in the way that was originally formulated by Hooft and Susskind would just not be true. Another example, which was noticed by Fischler and Susskind, so doing Susskind himself, is if you look at the universe on very large scales. The universe is spatially what we call flat. In other words, space is actually not all that curved. Okay, it's the same kind of space that we learn about in high school. You call Euclidean space. Okay, and galaxies are sort of, distributed at more or less even density, and each of these galaxies contains a certain amount of information, right? So that means that if I look at a really large ball of space, some interior of some large sphere, right, the amount of information is going to be proportional to the volume in that sphere. So the volume grows more rapidly than the area as I make the sphere larger. So I can find a sphere that's large enough that the information in it is bigger than the area. Right? I just look at a large enough sphere, and that's going to be the case. So these are simple examples of where the naive sort of holographic principle is just not true. And in fact, Fischler and Susskind pointed this out, and this is how I got dragged into the subject. I heard a talk by Willy Fischler that presented a proposal that they had come up with for fixing this issue. And the proposal had a number of difficulties, but one that I immediately recognized and apparently had not been pointed out before is this issue with a star inside the black hole, that it doesn't even work for the interiors of black holes. And so, to their credit, they didn't say, oh, you stupid little kid, and, we're very experienced people, and this might be a small deal. They said, oh, this sounds important. You should work on this. Our proposal is probably wrong. I thought that was just super cool, first of all. Like, Lenny was not like, and other people had criticized their proposal for various different reasons, and that hadn't moved them. But for some reason, I said something that they thought was important. And so I was like, okay, you know what? I am going to.
That's great.
And I did. And Fischler was just visiting, but Lenny was very encouraging. And I eventually came up with the proposal I came up with. And that, yeah. So I felt I was very lucky that I was at Stanford at that time, being exposed to this question and hearing about it.